Hi there and welcome to this user guide for the PriceYourOwnBets.com tennis model that's recently been added to the site. This particular model has three tabs. This first tab, dashboard, is where most of the work occurs. So you have all the input decisions on the left hand side here, the green cells. The main market prices are here on the right hand side with the summary information of how the match is going. I'll just have a quick look at the other two tabs. So the what if tab I'll get back to later, but it's kind of looking into the future to try and figure out how the match might pan out depending on different ways it plays out. And then there's a notes tab where there's a brief description similar to what I'm going to go through in this user guide. Okay, so we'll go back to the dashboard where we spend most of the time in this particular model. And we'll start first then with the structure variables. So the first decision that needs to be made is it a 3 or a 5 set match? It's not so much a decision as, just knowing what the match is. So if it's 3, you get correct scores here, 2-0, 2-1. It's only under over 2.5 sets. Whereas if I go to 5, then the correct score is now 3-0 to 3-2. There can be more sets played, and obviously the prices change depending on that. So I'll just stay in 3 for most of this discussion. You can also decide how the third set is played, how it ends. So in a lot of tournaments it's just a tie break like the other two sets, so you would pick tie break in this cell here. You can also pick win by 2 games. This is where they just keep playing indefinitely, like the long match at Wimbledon a couple of years ago. I think it went to 70-68 in the 5th set, so this model can deal with that pricing as well. And it can also deal with a champions tie break. This is a form of third set that was added originally for veterans matches on the seniors tour, but now they use it for some doubles matches as well. So that essentially is just a third set that's just immediately a tie break up to 10. So I can show you that in a minute when we go look at the state of play variables as to what that does. I'll just put this back to tie break for now. So you can put the player names in here, player A and player B, and that will basically, you can put the names in and obviously it will go to all the different places around the sheet. I'm not going to do that here because I might reset the model and don't want to lose the names. So for now we'll just deal with player A and player B. You can also make a decision here which is which player serves first. Obviously that's quite important. This should be defaulted to not known, and if it's defaulted to not known you don't have a first set correct score. The reason for that is simply because due to the vagaries of players likely to hold serve, you get some asymmetry here, even though this match is set to be both players holding 65. So if I change that to second, these two will flip over essentially, because this is set to be a 50-50 match at the moment. So okay, for now I'm just going to put that to player A serving first, and then we can now work our way down the main trading variables. The most important variable, like in all the models, there's one that is ultimately completely about the ability of the players, and for this one it's the starting hold serve percent. So here this is probably set for 2 reasonably good male players at around about 65%. Because these are both the same, you get a 50-50 match here, so everything's 50-50. Set 1, the match, actually set 1 game 1 here obviously is in favour of this player because he's serving, whereas if I made the other player serve, then that would flip over. So I'll just put that back to first again. So this is something that, it requires a bit of a feel for. So generally I think the way to do this is to really decide what you think the average for the match should be. So suppose I think this 65 average is about right, but I want to get this player A to say 60% to win the match. So let's try make him better. So we'll take him to 66 and this guy to 64. So that gets us about halfway there. Look to 54%. So if I go 1 more percent, then 65 and 63. I'm pretty much where I wanted to be now, 59. So if I wanted, I could just do another little bit to get to exactly 60%. So you can work in odds there or probability, whichever you prefer. So basically that's a decision at the start, and you can change it in running as you think the game is progressing, and tennis is quite a streaky game, and I think there's a lot to be observed by watching the match, so you might not always leave these the same. Well, having done that now at the start, in a funny way for this model, you should probably do the other variables first and then do this last to get to the correct match price. And all of these other variables can lead to different ways for the match supposedly progress as things happen. Just to illustrate this then, so if I go back to 65v65, I'm going to set this most recent set momentum to 0, which basically means that all the sets are just played pretty much the same. So because every player is 50% to win every set, then the chances of a 2-0 is just 50% times 50%, which is 25%, as you can see here. Well, data and matches and prices, they dictate that there is some impetus in a match. So in this 50-50 match, you might not know who is going to come out on top 2-0, but it's likely that whoever wins the first set will be favourite for the second set. So what this most recent set momentum, when I set that back to its value of 5, does is it acknowledges that. So if you look now, both players are more likely to win 2-0 than 2-1. This again is observed in the data that basically more matches are 2-0 than you would just expect, keeping stuff the same. So what does this actually mean? Well, if we go to the What If tab, it gives a good illustration of this. So basically, if A wins the first set, his whole percent goes up from 65 to 66.8, and player B's goes down to 61.8. So as a result, that makes this guy now player A 57%, 57.5% to win that second set. If B wins that first set, then it's obviously reversed. The exact way the numbers work for this is it's 5% of the upside here. So because he was 65%, there's 35% there, and so he gets 5% of that, and that's why this goes up 1.8%. This one goes down further because it's downside from 65%. But as you see, it basically leads to about a 5% difference in the whole percent, and that has an impact here on the probability of winning that set. So if A wins then B, or B wins then A, well, this comes now from the second variable here, which is set momentum memory. Now what this does is, once the second set's over, it says how much of the first set momentum do I now want to, still use. So if you set this to 100, then it will be all of the momentum will still be there for the third set. So if I go back to What If, these go back to 65 because the two sets have equalised each other out. But the default value of 50 seems about right, because what it says is that the player who won the second set has now got some momentum, but obviously it's not as much as the first guy had from winning the first set, so this has kind of come back now. So if A wins then B, it comes back to 63.4 against 65.9, and the same the other way. You can go further with this, so if it's a 5-set match, and I go back and look here, then you get all the different scenarios. And so that's what the What If is about, is really to get a feel for how the match will progress, and to really nail down hopefully that you agree with what would happen in the given situation. So for example here, look, BB, you see quite a strong move to player A because he's won the last two sets. So that's these two essentially go together in that respect. The match progression, well, what this one does is basically it's one for fitness or just for big player ability really, and what it does is it says that as the match goes on, will the player improve, will his whole percentage go up. So again, you might well want this in a 5-set match with a really fit person, or just simply if you've got a strong favourite, you probably want to set this a couple of percent for that particular player. And the reason for that is if it does get to 1 set all 4 all in a 3-set match or whatever, the big favourite is still probably going to be quite a good favourite. These big players, they find the way, and so that match progression is something that you might want to give a bit to the stronger player. So that's all of the stuff about kind of the match, all of the momentum stuff. These big pointers server and big pointers receiver, these work just on the game level. So the defaults I have here is just +1 for serve and 0 for receiver. But again, you probably want to make these positive for big players, players that play big points well, and make them negative for, players that get scared or choke or whatever. And so let's show an example of this. So here player A is set to serve first. So I will put him, a good example of this is on break point. So if I go to 30-40 and I set all of these big pointer servers to 0, you'll see that the player is now only 35% to win his own service game. Now this seems a fraction low, so you can bring this up really, and you can have your own feel and opinion. So the 1 brings this to 36. I could go as far as 3, which brings it to 39, and if I really wanted to go further, I could put the other player on receiver as negative, so now I get up to as much as 42% for that player to hold, despite the fact he's breakpoint down. If we look at 15-40, he's still 23% to hold, whereas without this momentum here, it'd be 20%. So again, something to play with. I've set these in this range -3 to 3. I won't go into the details of how all the maths works for this one because it's a bit complex. But it could be I need to go further with that. So for example, in that situation there, if the 3 and the -3, 23% doesn't seem enough, maybe I need to go a bit further. So if that's the case, then let me know, and I can go in and review the model. So okay, so that's pretty much all of the model gone through. I should just go through how you score it, and it makes pretty much common sense really. So as you see here, you score the game down the bottom here with the points of 15. So 40 for deuce, you go advantage, and if it comes back to deuce, you just go back to 40, and you can keep that going within the game. And then when the game is won, just set these back to 0 and give the game to the player. You can keep ticking through the points in the games, and then if you get to the tie break here, so if I go to 6-6, you'll see this points 15 becomes points 1. So now you're getting points, from 1 to 7 or whatever to score a tie break. So you can score this as far as you like. So if I go to 10-10, it realises it's still 50-50. You can go to 13-13, and the pricing's just iterating round. It knows that it kind of is coming back on itself, so there's no issues with the pricing here. One thing to be aware of when you move between the games that will create a tie break and whatever, so if you go give that 7-6 now, those points are still in there. It shouldn't make too much difference, because the model realises not to use them, but it's better just before you give that final game, just set that back to 0-0. So the next time you do get to a tie break, if it happens again, you won't have those points in there. Similarly for the points in the game, get rid of them before you set it to 6-all for the tie break. So I'm going to leave it there for this first part. I think I've gone over pretty much all of this stuff here. In the second part of the user guide, I'll go over some scenarios, and we'll just try and get a feel for looking into the variables in a bit more depth. So thanks very much for listening, and I hope you come back for the second part. Thanks very much.